Good morning. For those who may not know me, my name is Quentin Clark. I am the Corporate Vice President at Microsoft, responsible for our data platform work. So that's everything from SQL Server to our BI work to the work we do with Hadoop and basically everything in between. We love the theme of this conference, making data work. We actually propose that we extend it to making data work for everyone. At Microsoft, I believe, that the power of information is really at a precipice of an entire generational change. What people are going to be able to do, the empowerment that people are going to have at their fingertips, we're just at the beginning of that journey. Last fall at Strata, I spoke about bringing big data, the power of big data, to 1 billion people. And we literally meant that. We literally meant 1 billion people. But it's not necessarily just the traditional people that we think about when we're at these conferences, the data scientists, the analytics developers, and these kinds of folks. It's the lawyers, the farmers, the people working in governments, the students, the teachers. It is an entire sort of class of people who are starting to think about how information can change how they think about not just their business, but even things they're interested in, in their personal lives. And so we really have these stories about who these people are and how they're changing and starting to change, how their thinking is starting to change, and how big data is emerging as a major significant shift in how everything is going to be done. I have these 3 little stories I want to talk about that have these big data elements and the analytics and all the stuff sort of put together to make some of these points. The first is there's a company that builds solutions for dairy farmers, and it's actually equipment that they use for helping dairy production, all this stuff. This is SCR. And they've recently introduced a new product, which is a SaaS solution built entirely on the cloud, that it also introduces hundreds of thousands of sensors that are integrated into the cattle. Right? We talk about crowdsourcing. Here's a crowd of cows, right? And those cows are being measured on their body temperature and other biometric elements, and it turns out that in analytics of that data, that's all being done up in Azure, by the way, the company is able to offer to the dairy farmers the SaaS solution that lets them optimize production, okay, just based on all this new telemetry. So they're mixing sort of traditional, I think relationally stored structured data from their existing production systems, as well as all this new Internet of Things, IoT data that's coming from literally all the cattle. And then they're able to help the farmers understand in a turnkey way how to maximize the happiness of their cows, one of the things they talk about. Another example is actually closer to home for me at Microsoft. We have an organization called Digital Crime Unit that works with law enforcement to do things like take down botnets. Now, of course, this is definitely a big data scenario. There's Hadoop involved. There's databases involved. There's the entire sort of ecosystem of all the devices that are involved in this. Of course, is an Internet of Things kind of scenario. But one of the interesting things about this story really is about how visualization, how the data was obtainable and understandable by human, changed how they're able to do investigations. In one of these particular cases, it turns out when they took all this data, they had a ton of data about machines and stuff that were involved in this bot network, and they mapped it out on it. Someone just had the idea, let's just put it on a map of the globe. And by doing so, they saw something really interesting. There's basically a hole on the map where there are nearly no infections. And that visual cue made them go investigate, well, why is that? And it turns out that this particular system was developed to avoid getting infections in particular locations, which is a clear sign that this is probably where they're operating out of, which helped them focus and narrow in on their investigation. The third story I want to tell is actually about the city of Barcelona. And this is also, there's more telemetry, more machine devices, this kind of stuff. It's a bicycle program where they're offering, the city offers bicycles to the citizens to help them get around the city. Now, there's an element here of customer satisfaction, right? You come out of somewhere, you need to grab a bicycle and go to another place. Is there a bicycle available? And so there's people whose job it is every day to operationalize, making sure these bicycles are in the right places. Since they have crews to help move them around. The bicycles themselves have sensors, and they send telemetry up into Azure. The stations where the bicycles are plugged into, they also have a bunch of telemetry, so they know a lot. But the insight came was that the system needed to account for the social data that's emanating from the citizens of the city in order to optimize where these bicycles belong, right? Think about it. As people are engaging in the social sphere, they're also emitting their location, right? Because the GPS data comes with all this, all these tweets and all these Facebook posts and all this kind of stuff. And so they're actually pulling that data in as well to do the analysis to help on an hour-to-hour basis operationalize optimizing where all these bicycles are. It's kind of an interesting story. These three stories actually have a lot in common, right? Multiple data sources, running a business, so operationalization is really important. Visualizations, right? Having experiences that let people who are experts in a field become experts in the data, right? Finding a way to let them talk to the data. We believe that there really are these three elements that have to come together in order for the power of big data to truly reach the billion people. The first is about accessible data. And clearly the work in Hadoop is a big part of this, right? It's allowed us as an industry to go and embrace a whole new class of information. And this morning, we're really happy to launch the support for Hadoop 2.2 as part of HD Insight in Azure, which is our Hadoop service. And that's just an example of how we're trying to make sure that we can all embrace all this kind of data. But beyond that, it's actually also about what data we're even talking about. Actually, just before I got on the airplane yesterday, I was in a customer briefing with one of the three largest banks in the world, and we were talking about all the usual stuff, transaction processing and in-memory work and all those good things. But the conversation interestingly turned to the following topic. They are doing scenarios where they believe they need data from other parts of the industry and other industries in order to optimize their business better, which is like fascinating. It's one of the first times I've heard that specific conversation. They also believe they have data that would be of value to entirely different industries. And so that notion of different data sets is super important to this journey. Another piece that's important is enterprise grade. Just a little story. Many, many years ago, I was put in a job responsible for the core relational engine for SQL Server. And at the time, even, SQL Server was becoming, and now is, the most widely deployed commercial relational database on the planet. And the person I was working for pulled me aside to make a very specific impression on me. You're running people's businesses. The availability, the security, the data correctness, these things matter a ton, and you have to get these things right. You're now responsible for a huge part of the world's economy, basically, because businesses run foundationally on this technology. It's an attitude we bring to all our work. It's why we spent several thousand hours now working in Hadoop. It's why we've been so adamant about bringing Hadoop into Windows. It's because our customers are operationalizing those environments, and they need to integrate the value of Hadoop into their business process. The third element we talk about is immersive experiences. Here, it's not just enough to have the data or have it in a place where you can find it. You have to meet people at their curiosity. What I mean by that is that you and me and everybody are fundamentally curious about the things they care about, whether it's things in their job or things in their personal lives. They care about those things, and they will take the time to go and learn and become smarter about something. But you have to meet them there. You have to meet that curiosity with great experiences. On Monday, we're really happy to announce that the Power BI for Office 365 went to general availability. And it brings forward a lot of those immersive experiences, a natural language interface. You can just type questions in English and get back charts of answers. Tools, you can find relevant data sets. So there's a corporate catalog, and there's work we do to curate data sets from the public. All that's come together now in Power BI. Those immersive experiences are really important. And even for me personally, my kids and I were talking about the World Cup being in Brazil and the Olympics happening in Russia, and somehow that conversation turned into population by country within continents. And I was able to, using Power BI, bring that data together and produce for them an interactive model where they could just click on continents and see the population sorts by country and just hand it to them, right? I had it on my Surface. They were taking lunch break from skiing, and I handed it to them, and they're just there, completely engrossed in the information. A way different way for them to learn about that than if it had just been some static web page. So these things put together, we believe, are what it takes to get down the road to reaching the billion people. We count now the lawyers and the farmers and maybe the cows, and certainly my children, as amongst those billion people that are being impacted and getting value out of what big data is bringing to the world. The power of big data to a billion people is real. Thank you very much.